relating to someone who went through the same or at least something very similar than yourself is often the biggest step you can take towards anxiety recovery and finding the courage to take that leap of faith that you will inevitably need to take when you embark on the recovery journey. And that is because if you don't find someone that you can really truly relate to or had similar experiences than yourself, then it often feels like your anxiety is the worst case, that your symptoms are way too severe to be just anxiety, or that what you are experiencing is just way too intense to simply be only anxiety. And exactly for this reason, I want to share with you my story of what kind of symptoms I dealt with, the emotions I went through, and the processes I had to learn to overcome during my anxiety days. And if hearing other people's anxiety stories and symptoms is triggering for you, then you might want to tune off from this one. I have dealt with truly debilitating anxiety for around 5 years. And it all started with that first panic attack. That first panic attack had me genuinely believe that I was having a heart attack, or at least was on the verge of having a heart attack. That panic attack started because my fingers on my left hand went kind of numb. Not really numb, like I was confused if they were numb or sensitive, if that makes any sense. I didn't think too much of it, but I just constantly was in thought in my fingers, touching them, trying to feel what is going on. It was like I was completely chained by this sensation. I couldn't get rid of this thought. So these thoughts kept popping up, getting more intense, more intense, more intense. And with that, the sensation itself became more intense. And that's when I slowly started to worry. And I opened up a window on Google and typed in numb fingers on the left side. And you can imagine left side numbness. You won't find something nice on Google there. So that's why I never Google your symptoms. So I was eagerly going through all the pages, all the sites, and you can imagine everything on there was just negative, scary. There was almost no mention of anxiety. I guess there was no mention of anxiety at all. It was all heart attack, stroke, I don't know, some nerve damage, whatever. So yeah, that's when I really felt like the adrenaline rushing in my head. I could feel like these waves of fear hitting me. It's a weird sensation. It's like adrenaline was injected into my brain. So I started having this debate, this internal debate, if I should like get up and scream for help, call for an ambulance, or wait it out and see if it goes away by itself. But of course the symptoms became much worse. Suddenly I had like these heart flutters and my chest became tighter. My breathing became unnatural, like very shallow. And that numbness in my fingers turned into like a stabbing feeling that started here from my elbow going down to the fingers. And also like a kind of pulling sensation here on my nerves. It was weird. So in that moment I was just mentally pacing and racing around with my thoughts, trying to figure out what to do. But eventually I got to the point where I had to physically stand up and was pacing up and down the office, really trying to figure out the best solution for my situation. I was not 100% convinced I was having a heart attack, but also not 100% convinced I was okay. It was like this inner battle. Should I not? Should I not? Am I going to embarrass myself or not? That went on and on and on until eventually the symptoms just intensified and multiplied so much that I had to call someone and had to ask them to call the ambulance for me. And this is the moment where you hear a lot of people say that they slowly calmed down and felt embarrassed because they called an ambulance and now they feel fine. They noticed it was just anxiety. But I never arrived at that stage. Throughout all the 3 to 5 hours of waiting for the nurses to do the tests, waiting for the test results, waiting for the doctor, I was on that stretcher, really genuinely thinking I was about to die. I kept getting these waves of anxiety and really proper fear. And I curled myself up and tensed all my muscles because it felt like this could somehow protect me from all the symptoms I was feeling. And I can remember how I was just holding my father's hand on that bed, my eyes wide open and really in terror, thinking, this is it. This is the day I'm going to die. And you know what then happened? The doctor came, gave me a benzo pill, told me it was anxiety, gave me 3 more for the next day, and told me I should rest. And that's it. I maybe heard 2 sentences from the doctor, didn't explain what was happening, didn't say what was going on, just said anxiety and sent me back home. So that was the solution from the doctor for a half day full of anxiety, really believing I was going to die, full of symptoms and really proper terror. And in my mind, I just couldn't believe that somebody could look me in the eyes for like 10 seconds and simply say it's anxiety. So that was a big problem already from the first day. And I luckily never saw that doctor again. Okay, but to be fair, with that knowledge, or that doctor telling me that I was fine, it's just stress, I was kind of relieved. So my dad drove me home. I think I fainted out. I fainted in bed, like slept at 7 p.m. and woke up kind of feeling okay. I still had that mental image of that panic attack and that fear of the previous day in my head. But I thought that now that I knew it was just anxiety, I should be fine. Nothing will happen. Well, of course I was wrong. Symptoms started popping up again. Fear and terror were raging in my head once again. But this time it was different, because this time I actually knew it was anxiety. I knew what anxiety could do to you, at least to the extent that WebMD describes anxiety. And I got that reassurance from the doctor before that it was stress, but still I was getting all these sensations and feelings. And so in my mind it meant that this time it couldn't be anxiety. It couldn't be a panic attack. It had to be something more serious. It had to be a real physical illness. So there I was once again in the middle of a busy street in Hong Kong, really begging my father to call me an ambulance. Because this time it is a heart attack. This time it is the big one. This time it is the real thing, the real deal. My dad tried to convince me that it's just stress and panic, but I didn't believe him because everything I was feeling was just too real. Back then I couldn't even imagine that anxiety can create these real sensations and feelings. So I really begged him to get me that ambulance, which he eventually did. But again, everything came back fine. I was okay. And this cycle kept repeating over and over and over again. I don't know how many times I called the ambulance throughout the years. I don't know how many times I went to the doctor throughout the years. But it was just a constant repetition of getting panic attacks or feeling sensations and symptoms and finding that reassurance from doctors, which gave me some relief. I always returned back to being that anxious ball of symptoms, if that makes sense. So just a few weeks after that first panic attack, I was completely consumed by my anxiety. Not really by the anxiety, I was consumed by the symptoms and feelings I was experiencing everywhere on my body. And I really felt so hopeless because nobody could figure out what was going on with me. I mean, that's at least how I felt. Of course, people told me it was anxiety, but that didn't go into my head. For me, it was not anxiety, it was a physical thing that just nobody could catch or nobody could figure out what it was. So I was so consumed by the physical symptoms that I really spent days or even weeks researching a specific sensation, so that I really believe I was more knowledgeable on that specific disease than some other doctors out there. That is how deep I was into my research, how deep I was into my quest of getting to the bottom of it all. This quest, this research, pretty much formed my entire life. There was all left to it. I couldn't do anything else. My brain wouldn't let me do anything else. There were actually only two parts left in my life. On the one side, I was pretty much waiting for that one big blow to strike me down and kill me off, so to say. And on the other side, I was kind of racing towards finding a solution, finding the key of why I was feeling the way I did. Maybe there was a certain disease that nobody knew of, or somebody in my age had like 1,000,000 to 1 chance of having, and the doctors didn't pay attention to that. That was what I was looking for. It was kind of a time game in my head. I thought, if I don't do something now, something bad is going to happen later. And you can imagine how much stress that causes to your mind and body, and basically everything. So progressively, the symptoms got worse. And they didn't only pop up when the anxiety was high or I was feeling specifically stressed. Now the symptoms, or plenty of the symptoms, were there 24/7 for days, weeks, or even months on end without a break. Some of the symptoms that were with me pretty much all the time were the numbness, which started in my fingers, now spread to like the side of my neck and my calves. And also I had like a burning sensation here in my here on my forearm and on my quads. I also felt lightheadedness, and sometimes I got like this blurry sensation in my vision where everything seemed kind of milky and dreamlike. That was something that was with me really for, I don't know, the better part of 2 years. And also my body turned into like a ball of ache. Like my muscles were tense pretty much everywhere. I couldn't get my mind not to think about how hurtful my body is, how tense my neck is, how hurtful my calves are. The entire day I would just be like stretching my neck, massaging my shoulders, rolling around on the floor, popping my bones. So with all these sensations happening to me, I started going or seeking out specialists in certain fields, like a neurologist, cardiologist, how to call it, virologist, a chiropractor, some kind of herb specialist. I got CT scans, X-rays, MRI scans from the brain. Everything you can think of, I pretty much did. But nothing really helped me. Nothing gave me relief or took some of the fear away from me, at least not for long. I always returned back to that anxious ball. And so I always went back to my quest to finding a solution. Not for anxiety, but for a physical illness, of course. Because back then I thought that if I got a specific number of tests, if I scanned every part of my body, if my blood was tested for all these certain diseases and cancer markers, if I pretty much got everything covered, then I could accept it was anxiety. Without knowing 100% everything is clear, there was no chance for me to even start believing that this could be anxiety. In my brain, what I was feeling was way too intense to be anxiety. So that was always like a second thought for me. So in my mind, the game was kind of solving a gigantic puzzle. Like, if I would have all the pieces together and made them perfectly match, then I would get the picture. Then I would see clearly what is happening to me. So that was my mission. At this stage, I was a little bit more than a year into the whole anxiety experience. And here it got so much worse quite quickly, because at some point I was even having like this mental self-debate if I would rather die from a heart attack or cancer. And I came to the conclusion that cancer would be better, because then I could prepare myself for death. I could say goodbye to my loved ones. I could prepare a will. And that will I actually did draft up, did write, and told everyone where they could find it in case of my inevitable passing. And mind you, I was 25, 26 back then. And just a year before, all my thoughts or worries were which party to go, how many drinks to have, and how to meet girls. That was my life before that. But now I was this highly sensitized young man that would be triggered by the slightest wind, like hitting me here on my neck. That was a little bit unexpected. Maybe a window was open somewhere in the office. Lights changing or flashing when entering from one room to the other would set me off in a panic mode, because I was confused if my eyes were failing me or if it actually was the light. Someone unexpectedly knocking at the door, I would be spiraling in thoughts. My clothes like rubbing here or rubbing at my calves when walking around made me think of numbness. Like, I wasn't sure if that was my clothes rubbing my skin or my skin giving me wrong signals, telling me that there's something wrong. And overall, I would just be getting the weirdest sensations. Like, I would get these cut-like sensations here in my chest that really felt like somebody took like a razor blade, small razor blade. It gave me like small little cuts everywhere, here on the arms, on the legs. And the worst ones were like these ice pick headaches. It felt like somebody took a big ice pick and poked it right into my brain. Like my entire brain would be just flashing up. And I also would be getting these brain zaps that felt like my brain was off for just a second. Like when I was walking around, it felt like I was just about to faint, and then my brain would be backfiring up, keeping me awake. You know the feeling when you're in bed and sometimes you dream that somebody's throwing a ball and you get this shock feeling. That's what I used to get like every 5 minutes. And especially when trying to sleep, these brain zaps would keep me up all night long. And this is also where the anxiety took away more and more from my life. I couldn't even watch TV or watch a show anymore because something exciting or disgusting would trigger symptoms. I couldn't concentrate on a book anymore because my brain was never really there. I was always scanning my body. Like, my brain was always looking inwards, trying to get ready for action in case that big blow does eventually pop up. So I was always on edge, always waiting for that thing to happen. Also, eating eventually became something I dreaded because thinking of fats, thinking of unhealthy food made me kind of cringe. So I only could eat very clean stuff like salads and chicken breast. Everything else would get my brain into hyperdrive, thinking about how the fat would be clogging my arteries and making me more prone to that inevitable heart attack or stroke, for example. Also, hot showers were a risk factor for me now because the heat would be too much for my heart to handle. Getting up too fast from bed or from a chair another risk factor because that would raise my blood pressure, and maybe a blood clot could then be released into my bloodstream and blocking my vein to the brain. Yeah, these were the thoughts constantly in my brain, all the time, 24/7. Round and round and round it went. And besides that, I was also constantly checking my face, like, was everything in place? Was everything there where it should be? Could I even tell if I was having a stroke, if everything is there where it should be? Was my brain capable of analyzing correctly? So yes, the fight or flight mode really did its best to keep me safe and tried really to figure out every possible scenario of danger. And the longer I dealt with anxiety, the less panic attacks I would get. Eventually, towards the end, I wouldn't get any panic attacks at all. But that didn't mean that my life was better, because the symptoms would get much more. I can't even say that the symptoms got much more, just my entire body was like one symptom. Everything hurt, everything was out of place, everything didn't feel right. So wherever I checked, and I always checked, something didn't feel correct. It was like my body was slowly withering away and there was nothing I could do. It was at this stage where I often crawled into my parents' bed and had to hold my mom's hand to find some sleep. Not because I wanted to feel comfort, but because I wanted her to feel when my body went cold, or feel when I had a seizure or something. It was another safety behavior that I developed over time. I always needed to be sure that I covered every aspect of danger possible. And these were the ones what I consider where I have hit rock bottom. For the past 5 years, I tried really everything to unveil the disease. Not anxiety, the physical disease, which I was certain I was having. Nobody could find anything. I couldn't research my way out of it. I couldn't get a test that showed that something was wrong. Nobody really cared. Nobody could help me. And so I gave up hope. I laid down my quest and gave up. I really told myself to F it and give up. If it happens, it happens. If it's a serious disease, then what can I do? If it's anxiety, then well, at least now I'm living and working towards a life I can be proud of at some point, instead of withering away. I just simply really had enough. But this is not the video about my recovery journey, which you can find, I think, here somewhere. But I do hope that sharing my story kind of helped you gain some trust in your anxiety diagnosis, and that you now genuinely can believe that anxiety can create the craziest and scariest symptoms, and also the most debilitating emotions and feelings. And I hope it gives you the courage to take that leap of faith and also say, F it, and start regaining bits of your life back.